Hello everyone and welcome to yet another video of Think Design Work Smart, as we are now calling them. And today what I have for you is another reaction to an article that has been brought to my attention by Adi. And by the way, I have Adi here with me. Hi Adi.
Hello.
So I have not read this article, which is something new for me because usually I am the one who reads the article and then we react together. But this time you brought it up, and
Yes.
I will try to read it live and then we'll react together. But before we start, please tell us a bit of background. Why have you found this interesting?
I find it, I was looking, in fact, for something else. I was looking for how, in fact, because I'm working with a few teams where more they wanted to start with Scrum, but I would go to something that's a little more lightweight than Scrum. I was looking for experience in other organizations, and I found this article which is really good because it says about experience from many organizations on using Scrum. And also the context of this a new team that I'm working with is that they are starting a new product from zero, which is not something you do very often. So for this specific context, I was trying to find out something to give them to show them where Scrum is appropriate and where, in fact, it brings you too much overhead. So that's the background.
Right, and this is a blog post published on the blog called the Pragmatic Engineer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't know I don't know the author. I just found it. The author is Gergely Orosz.
Yeah, and it's published quite recently. So last updated 28th April 2022. So this is about a month ago, roughly.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So let's go a bit through it. Already it starts with a diagram showing teams of engineers and trying to collaborate, I guess. It's 3 teams.
Yes, exactly. And other engineers. So I see 3 teams and other engineers.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I read here in this article is, in fact, kind of a battle, let's say, between project management, product ownership, and the way that these are perceived in Scrum. So having a Scrum Master or organizing like that with a framework of work up front. And there's, in fact, a very interesting analysis from different organizations on how these ways of working have failed or have succeeded.
Mm. And I like the title. So the title is How Big Tech Runs Tech Projects and the Curious Absence of Scrum. And this is actually true. If you look at many large companies, there is there's very rarely a mention of Scrum. One interesting case for curious people is Kent Beck joined Facebook a few years back. And Kent Beck is the one who basically created extreme programming, another agile method, let's say, or a set of engineering practices. It's actually both. And what was very interesting for him is that he joined Facebook. He expected to teach people at Facebook the things that he learned during many years of software development. But he noticed that most of those things were not useful to them. And they were using something that was completely different. And It was very, very strange for him. So he decided to learn more about how they were working first before he was able to help them. And the whole story is in a podcast, which I invite. I will post a link in the description, but if you are really curious about this type of things, I think it's a revealing story. And particularly since, Kent Beck, imagine you are Kent Beck, you are somebody who has invented or created or rediscovered a method of working, and then you don't go and try to push your method, but instead you are in the beginning waiting to understand how things are working. It's a good example of intellectual humility, let's say, and trying to help other people.
Yeah, it's part of the EXP values, in fact. So.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so let's see. Let's make this a bit bigger, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think that now.
So, yeah, these 4, headlines are really interesting.
Yeah.
That you have, there's a survey here about project management approaches across the industry. And typically there is some project management at big tech, but it's not the, let's say, traditional project management, and it's also not the Scrum approach to project management.
Yeah.
So it's something very interestingly in between, and Scrum is basically lacking at almost all the big tech.
So just to read a bit, project management is a topic most people have strong opinions on, and I'm no exception. To answer the question of how different companies run engineering projects, I pulled in help from across the industry. In this issue, we'll cover project management approaches across the industry, a survey with over 100 companies represented, plus key takeaways, project management of big tech, how are these done, how does the organizational setup of big tech influence how projects are executed, the lack of Scrum at big tech, why is the popular framework missing from most of big tech, and are there takeaways for companies operating outside this model? How should you run projects in your team? I'll share my personal take. Okay, before we jump in, here's a personal story about why it's sometimes hard to put the finger on how important project management approaches are. And then there's
the story is about Skype. Scrum. Apparently the author has joined Skype in 2012, and in that moment I also remember I know people who were working as coaches there, and indeed there was a big work, very many coaches were involved in this. And after a while, Skype got bought by Microsoft, and there was this very, a bit more than Scrum maybe, because you have teams rotating the Scrum Master role, and then what was interesting is that Microsoft looked at Skype and wanted to have the same model, try to approach the same model in all of the corporation. But what's very interesting here is that WhatsApp started working in the market, and they were a lot faster. And it was every month they looked how WhatsApp was taking over market share, and Skype was less and less important on the market. And WhatsApp wasn't using anything like Scrum. They were just they were using something else, and we'll see a bit later. But what's important is that what he says here, that they deliberately ignored all heavyweight processes.
And that seems to include Scrum.
Exactly. So Scrum, from the point of view of WhatsApp, which was basically a startup at that moment, for them, Scrum was a heavyweight process.
Yeah, and let's remind our viewers, if you haven't watched our conversation with Udi Zul, he is actually talking about something like that, Scrum, a bit heavyweight for me. What I do is I try to figure out what's the smallest thing we can deliver, we work on that, we deliver it, and so on. And that's basically what we are doing. The smallest and the most valuable thing. That's there's a bit of a challenge there. So we don't have planning meetings, we don't do estimation, we just pick what's most valuable that we can deliver, build it, and make sure it works. And I assume it's something along these lines with WhatsApp as well, but we'll see.
Yeah, interesting is a bit lower. There's a table about methods of working and how they use project management and who typically leads engineering projects. What I found very, very interesting in the table, there, is that typically who leads engineering projects in big tech, in venture funded startups, in non-venture funded tech companies, are tech leads or engineers.
Yeah.
So, in these non-venture funded tech companies, apparently there's also a dedicated project manager. But most of the time, what I can see who typically leads engineering projects are engineers or tech leads.
Yeah, venture funded startups, you have product managers as well.
But if you look in all the areas, you have in just a few areas like a project manager, you have in a few areas someone like a Scrum Master, but most of the time is engineering.
Yeah, and to be honest, this is the area where we've been working a lot in the past, few years, large non-tech companies. So in my mind, that includes things like banking, insurance, large financial organization, not the new fintech.
Medical organizations or
medical organizations and so on. The ones that are just realizing now that they are actually a tech company who happens to deliver other things. Right?
Yes.
And in that case, the Scrum Master is often thought of as being a project manager. Right.
And sometimes he's just a project manager with a different name.
Yeah. So you can already see this difference. Here, very technical leadership. And here, whereas here is probably more like project manager kind of leadership.
So I found that very interesting. And if we look a bit on the most common way of working on the left, we only find SAFE in this area, the large non-tech companies.
Yeah, of course.
SAFE is missing from any other areas. Otherwise, you find Scrum and Kanban almost everywhere along the line. Besides big tech and public tech companies, which work more, I don't know, in a typical, more like project management, like plan, build, ship, with some iterations. So you could call that iterative waterfall probably, or something improved.
I mean, it depends on how short are the iterations, right?
Exactly.
Because if this iteration is 1 day or less than 1 day, or less than 1 week, then
exactly.
You have lightweight planning, you have build, you have ship.
So if you can ship every week or so, you don't have iterative waterfall, you have something very important, very useful and interesting for the market at this moment. But this is important. So a ship cadence is not here, and I think that would be very interesting to see, because I think that defines also the quality of the code, the quality of the product, the how well that company can pivot if needed in the market. So how often you ship is very important from this point of view.
It also relates to the complexity of products. Because let's be honest, so even in these big tech companies, okay, there are products who have very complex components. Absolutely. You have things like AI, you have things like machine learning and so on. But actually a lot of these things that they develop are part of front end. Right? If you think about Facebook, it will be things like, okay, so let's have the like button a bit on the left or on the right or more blue or whatever. Things like that. So many of these things you can actually iterate very fast. And one of the reasons that I'm saying this is because I also know that Facebook deploys like hundreds, if not thousands of times a day.
Yeah.
So, okay, there are a lot of people working there. And they don't deploy to everybody, to all the user base. They deploy iteratively as well to parts of the user base. But they are able to do that. Okay, it is an ability. On the other hand, I know the story of Basecamp. And Basecamp, if you don't know, is a company that's building brilliant products for project management. And not only, but mostly for project management. They also have an email product as well right now, an email client. And what they ended up doing, because they focus a lot on the quality of user experience, they realized that they need 6 weeks iterations to do that. They basically plan to solve a problem in 6 weeks, and they work on that, try to get the best UI, the best UX, the best everything, and then maybe they ship, maybe they don't, because sometimes they don't get to something that's actually useful. Or, well, no, they get to something useful, but not necessarily good enough. So there are these differences, but they know very well what they are doing, right? So Basecamp is using a lot of XP practices. That's not a blank check for everybody to deploy every 3 months, because that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah, I think what we should look at, in fact, is the cost of deployment.
Yeah.
Because if it takes 4 weeks to test and 1 week to make the packages and I don't know, make smoke tests on all the environments and then deploy on one node, hope that everything works well, and then continue on the other nodes of your system, and all in all it takes, I don't know, 2 months, I think that's the problem. So but if cost of deployment, it means that everything or almost everything is automated from the point of view of the checks of the product, of the environments, and then you can deploy cheaper, I think that's the way to go. Then it's just a business decision.
Yeah. All right, so interesting. We already can see that it's more, the leadership here is more technical.
Right. Yeah, and below a bit it says, I think we should move on a bit faster to this, which is very interesting. Insights that are worth thinking about are below. And these are the things it says. Even below. below. Yeah. So it says like that. Teams with dedicated project managers typically recorded lower satisfaction ratings at public or venture-funded tech companies. However, at non-venture funded companies and consultancies, several respondents were very happy with project management and called out these people as a reason for their satisfaction.
I have a theory for why this happens, but
yeah,
I
me
think
too.
it's a self-selection kind of thing based on the company culture. The big tech grew up from Silicon Valley startups, which tend to be very focused on producing things and not that focus on organizing, right? It's basically ship things as fast as possible. Facebook used to say break things fast and things like that. So and that's the culture. And then of course, who would go there? Well, people who like to build things and don't like to be bothered by those pesky people trying to organize work.
Yeah. Then, another insight. Teams being allowed to choose their own way of working was more common at public tech companies and venture-funded scale-ups. Large non-tech companies and smaller non-venture-funded companies were more likely to mandate the same approach for all teams within the company.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed in the clients that we are talking about that they have a hard time understanding the differences between the different methods, and it's usually much easier to start with one method and say, okay, let's everybody use Scrum, and then we'll figure out who can use Kanban and so on.
Yeah, because Agile means Scrum, and it means you need to have story points, and it means you need to have a high-level estimation front, and you need to have a plan.
Because nobody reads the Scrum guide.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So then, team autonomy and high satisfaction seems to be correlated. Many people rating their satisfaction at 4 or 5 mentioned autonomy, freedom and flexibility, and the putting of quality first at the team level as a positive.
So now what I don't understand is how this correlates with project management here.
Yes, that's very interesting.
I mean, there is a way of doing project management that involves levels of autonomy, freedom, flexibility, and so on.
Maybe that's what it's about, because they were happy about project management that call these people as a reason for their satisfaction. Maybe there are project managers in those organizations who go this way of working.
Okay.
By enabling, in fact, autonomy.
Yeah. Because you can do project management in the style of a Scrum Master, more hands-off and
more trying to solve the impediments of the team, trying to help the team, empower the team, but not very abruptly, right? Make sure that they have the skills to do whatever they need.
Yeah.
And then go on. Yeah.
I mean, the first time I've read about something related that sounds like a Scrum Master was once again as a style of management from Silicon Valley. And it was described as the type of manager who lets the engineers do whatever they need to do to ship things and just makes sure to take the furniture from out of their way, right? So basically remove impediments.
Yeah.
And I think I read this a long time before I ever heard about Scrum. Right, so
that probably makes sense to, I guess people can invent the same things but call them in a different way.
Yeah. Okay.
And it says teams struggling often had little to do with the methodologies. People mentioned lack of vision, good engineers leaving, lack of transparency, or poor tooling as reasons why things went badly. Of course. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I know a lot of, I think, so lack of vision, I think, is more rarely a problem. But lack of transparency, oh my lord, if people were like 50, just a bit more transparent in most of these organizations, and just to make sure that, you know, this is why, this is what we are doing, this is why we are doing it, and so on, then that already would be such a boost for everybody in the company.
But we're so busy, we don't have the time to have all this transparency. And why do they need to know? You know, they should just do their tasks.
Yeah, just be over transparent, right? If you can be over transparent, forget about Scrum, forget about everything else. Everything else being equal, if you are just a bit more transparent, you'll have more happy engineers. That's...
And not only engineers, I think. Also, happier managers.
Yeah, in general. And then poor tooling, absolutely. I mean, look, I still remember the days when I was working on Visual C++, and you could come at the office, start your computer, go and have a coffee because Windows would start very slowly, then come back, start Visual Studio, go back, have a chat with everybody in the company, and then go back, and only then you'd have the project loaded. No reason.
And then you made the change, you were to compile and go to play ping pong for half an hour, right?
Yeah.
So...
Exactly. So in that case, obviously, don't try to change. I mean, right. So that's what they say. Now, what we know, though, is if you introduce something like Scrum, you have to have more transparency. You would get a list of impediments that include poor tooling. And then if you start solving those, then you have a chance. Right? So...
But the idea is that what they say, no change of methodology would help because the issues ran deeper.
Yeah.
So apparently, even if you have a list of impediments at the team level, you go, whoever is the person, I don't know, the Scrum Master, the project manager, the tech lead, whatever. If those impediments aren't solved by the rest of the organization, it doesn't matter that you're using Scrum or project management or waterfall or DSDM or whatever you want to use. That's, I think, the core issue.
Yeah. And in that case, when you try adopting Scrum, many people will start leaving because they realize nothing changes. It's... All right.
But I don't think the issue is Scrum. The issue is the whole organization.
Of course. Scrum can just bring up all these problems. But it's up to you what you do with them, and then, you know, group psychology, what happens next. But
about tooling, please.
I like this one.
That was what I wanted to say about tooling.
Yeah. Jira has been mentioned mostly with negative associations. All 13 mentions of Jira were in this setting.
So that's very interesting. This is staggering low and means 83% of engineers would advise against Jira.
Incredible.
So why still people use Jira is a big question mark.
As a counterpoint, an engineering leader at a public tech company with stable growth shared that their organization heavily relies on Jira, using it as a knowledge engine. In their case, Jira works well for large-scale coordination after the organization fully adopted it. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's a tool and you need to know how to use it.
Absolutely,
but
yes.
It's, and of course, let's face it, Jira started off as a project management tool with tasks, and you needed to go and say how much you worked on the task, and it's for that kind of very micromanagement approach sometimes. And then we started using Jira for Scrum and then for Kanban and who knows what else. But the old style remained. And my biggest problem is the user experience of this tool, which remained 15 years ago. Nothing changed.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk anymore about Jira because we did a video about Jira. And if you are interested in what we think about it, you can watch that one. So let's see. We only have time to look at the next section or the next interesting thing, and then we'll stop for this and we'll let our viewers tell us if they want us to talk more about this article.
This is very interesting. Project management approaches that do not work well share a few characteristics. Engineers not involved in estimations.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, if you don't let the team be involved in estimations, then basically they're just guesses as anything else. As I don't know, I would guess how much time it takes a surgeon to do heart surgery. Same thing. It's the same level of knowledge as someone else doing this estimation.
And but you can also do something that I think it's even worse, which is you ask for estimations and then you completely dismiss those.
It's too big. No. We know better.
We know better.
Yeah. Of course, it's also a waste of time.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So this is then obvious. Okay.
It says requirements changing even with dedicated project managers.
Oh boy. So I think this is a style of thinking for engineers, software engineers, whereas we expect things not to change in something that is called software, which is...
Yes, but I think there are two things here to ponder about. So it's not very clear here. It could be about the requirements that change when you are working on them. So you're working on something and someone says, no, you have the wrong algorithm. We found out it's wrong. You need to change it now. And then you change it and say, no, we have still one addition to make. And you continue changing. No, it's the first time it was good. So I think this is madness. If you do this is madness. And I fully agree. But if it's about now we did this button red and then we want to make it green, I think this is just normal. Or we had an algorithm then, and now we need to have another algorithm, I don't know, 6 months later. I think that's normal.
Yeah. So the way I think about it is there's a point where you start working on a feature. Let's call it a feature for the lack of a better word. That feature should be relatively small, right? I mean, it should be 2-3 days, maybe. Let's say a week. Okay, but that's about it. And then you work on that. If you may find out things during this time, right? You may find some additional cases, test cases, edge cases, error cases, things like that. I think that is still absolutely fine. The problem is if you start this and then in the middle of it you get somebody telling you, oh no, that's not, we want something completely different. Oh. But then you deploy this thing and now you're starting a new feature, and that feature might involve changing something that exists. That is absolutely fine, right? So it's a matter of what we are understanding by change.
Yes, exactly.
But I still know many people who like to think about the whole product or the whole module or whatever they are building And this is like a jewel, and we are thinking about the jewel, and it's like a diamond and so on. And then a project manager comes and says, oh no, we need to change something. And then you are annoyed because you need to chip at your jewel. And that's not very healthy, because once again, we are doing software, which means it changes.
Exactly.
All right. And the last one.
And there's another one. Yeah, please go ahead.
Teams with no autonomy to change a failing project management approach also recorded low satisfaction. These kinds of responses were pronounced at companies where all teams were expected to follow the same methodology. Right. So this is the one challenge, I think, with how managers understand Scrum. Because often they understand, like, yeah, everybody has to have 2-week sprints and everybody has to do planning at that time. And the story point is to be this value, and so on. And then we start comparing velocities or whatever. And of course, that doesn't work, right?
Yep.
I once worked with a team in a bank that was doing, I don't even recall what they were doing, but something that didn't fit at all with let's say, the vanilla Scrum. And they ended up, because what I told them, okay, so we still need to have some visibility. That's one of the principles, and we still need to be very certain, be able to show where we are in the process, and be able to learn from our mistakes. And that was basically it. This is what we kept. And instead of having a whole, backlog, they decided to have a timeline with the things they needed to do. And you always knew where you are on the timeline, right? So you could always show, okay, we are here on the timeline, and at the end of that mini project, they would have a retrospective and learn some more, and that was it. So it's fundamentally the same principles, but applied differently too. And that's just an example of how many variations you can have on, let's say, project management approaches.
Yep.
All right. So I think that's it from now. Let's quickly show this, because I think this was very interesting.
Indeed.
The companies, there are central methodology, what project management methodology is typically used, and who typically leads. And overwhelmingly, so we have Amazon, Apple, Datadog. I don't know who Datadog is. Facebook, Google, Netflix, Shopify, Spotify, and Uber. There's no central methodology teams can use. Typical project management methodology: plan, build, iterate, ship. At Amazon, it's even a 6-page plan. And a pizza team, a 2-pizza team. I think it's a 2-pizza team. And basically all of them are kind of plan, build, ship, right? Plan, build, ship, plan, build, ship. Except Shopify, which is get stuff done in 6-week cycles.
Which is, again, what you said about Basecamp. So we hear again the 6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks. And it makes sense, because Shopify needs to be very focused on UX as well. Less so at Google, for example. Who typically leads this? Tech lead or an engineer.
Yep.
So very interesting indeed. Now, I don't know exactly what to make out of it. Because on the other hand, not everything that works for big tech works for other companies. But it is definitely something to ponder about. What would be your conclusions after this?
I would say that I remembered a very nice T-shirt that our friend Olaf Levitz had at one conference, and he said, "Don't scale Scrum, descale your organizations." So I think that would be the conclusion. Instead of trying to scale a way of working, a method of working, no, let the teams choose knowingly. I mean, you should have people who maybe consult them or tell them what is useful in their context. But descale your organizations by having these smaller teams who can deliver stuff.
Yeah.
If it's 6 weeks, if it's 4 weeks, if it's 2 weeks, if it's 2 days or 2 hours, that depends on the context. But you need to have these teams who are autonomous, kind of small, and the organization gives them the ability to work like that by descaling the organization.
Yeah, so here's an experiment you can make if you are a manager in an organization that is thinking about scaling Agile. Make a team of 6 people at most. Give them one small project that is ideally customer-facing part of your product.
Mm-hmm.
Give them, let's say, 6 weeks. It can be shorter, maybe 1 week,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 2 weeks. At most 6 weeks. And just let them do the job and deliver. And if they cannot do it, then you don't know what to scale. You have nothing to scale.
Exactly.
First, you need to make sure that you can deliver these small things, these increments. Right, so can you deliver in 2 weeks a small product, a small project, part of your bigger product? Or do we need 2 weeks for testing with the testing department, 2 weeks for deployment with the IT ops, 2 weeks of meetings with various people, and so on? Because then what are you trying to scale? You are scaling something that's wasteful, right?
Yeah.
I guess that would be the basic thing, because what these companies have done is fundamentally to strip away everything that stays in the way of deployment, of shipping things.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's also management, from the management point of view, from the technical point of view,
yeah,
as tooling and so on, but also I think from the mindset point of view,
yeah,
which is really important.
Absolutely, yes. So part of it is automation, part of it is management that stays away and just removes impediments. Part of it is clarity, so having a clear direction, clear requirements, whatever you need. And part of it is mindset, the ability to think small, think simple, and ship.
And maybe trust your team. I think that's something very important.
Yeah.
Because why do you need to micromanage someone whom you trust?
Yes, absolutely. All right. So I think that's it for today.
Yes.
Thank you, Adi. This was very interesting.
Thank you.
So you heard our thoughts. What do you think? Are you in an organization that uses Scrum, Kanban, something else? How does it work for you? Would you like to make an experiment where you can see how you can ship things very quickly in a small team that thinks in a different way, in a way that allows you to think simpler, smaller? Because maybe we could make this happen. Who knows? Just let us know. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Tell other people about this. Ask your colleagues what is their context. how they feel about these things that we are talking about. If you have any other ideas, let us know. And next week, there's still time for you to register to CPP Europe if you are interested. It's on 24th May, and it will be really, really cool. Check out cppeurope.com for information. It's online, live, digital edition, so you can join from wherever you are, and it will be a very good program. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.